Welcome to Paranormal Pages. Let's get straight into the true scary stories. Story 1. The Tapping. Living on the 12th floor had its perks: a breathtaking view of the city, a quiet distance from the bustling streets below, and a sense of seclusion I had come to cherish. My apartment was a sanctuary of solitude, filled with the artifacts of my life, books lining the shelves, a collection of vintage clocks, and a thick carpet that muffled every footstep. It was in this cocoon of comfort that the first tap reached my ears. It was a cold winter night, and the wind howled outside, its mournful wail wrapping around the building. I sat by my desk, a hot cup of tea in hand, engrossed in a novel. The gentle, rhythmic tapping on the window drew my attention. I glanced up, expecting to see a branch swaying in the wind. But there were no trees that high. The tapping continued, steady and deliberate, sending a shiver down my spine. I walked to the window and peered out into the darkness. The city lights glowed below, cars moving like tiny beetles. My reflection stared back at me, pale and concerned. There was nothing outside but the endless night and the sound of the wind. I shook my head, chalking it up to the building settling or some other mundane cause. I returned to my book, though my mind was no longer on the story. The tapping grew louder as the hours passed, each knock echoing in the silence of my apartment. I tried to ignore it, to immerse myself in the pages before me, but the sound burrowed into my consciousness, refusing to be dismissed. I began to feel an inexplicable unease, a sense that I was not alone. It was as if the very air in the room had grown heavier, pressing down on me with invisible weight. "Who's there?" I called out, my voice wavering. There was no answer, only the relentless tapping. I moved closer to the window, my heart pounding. I placed my hand against the cold glass, half expecting to feel a response. Nothing. I pulled back the curtains, exposing the black void outside. The tapping stopped abruptly, leaving an eerie silence in its wake. Sleep was impossible that night. I tossed and turned, my mind replaying the sound over and over. When dawn finally broke, I was exhausted, my eyes gritty with fatigue. I went through my day in a daze, the memory of the tapping haunting my every thought. By evening, I was on edge, every creak and groan of the building sending my nerves into overdrive. As darkness fell once more, I prepared for another sleepless night. I sat in my armchair, a glass of wine in hand, staring at the window. The tapping began again, soft at first, then growing louder and more insistent. This time, I felt a chill in the air, a cold that seeped into my bones. I wrapped a blanket around myself, but the cold persisted, gnawing at the edges of my sanity. Determined to find the source of the sound, I approached the window with renewed resolve. I pressed my face against the glass, my breath fogging up the pane. And then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw it, a shadow flitting past, too quick to be anything solid. I stumbled back, my heart racing. The tapping had returned, now accompanied by a low whisper that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. "Let me in," the voice hissed, sending a bolt of terror through me. I backed away, my mind racing. I had to find a way to stop it, to understand what was happening. But deep down, I knew that whatever was out there was not something I could easily escape. Hey, subscribe for more scary stories. The next morning, I was a wreck. I could barely keep my eyes open, and my hands trembled as I sipped my coffee. The events of the previous night played over and over in my mind, like a twisted reel of film. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, that the tapping was a warning of something far more sinister. Desperate for answers, I decided to visit the building manager, Mr. Alvarez. Mr. Alvarez was a grizzled old man with a stooped back and a perpetually sour expression. His office was a cluttered mess of paperwork and ancient, dust-covered furniture. As I recounted my experience, his face remained impassive, but I noticed a flicker of something in his eyes, recognition, perhaps, or fear. "You say you heard tapping on the window?" he asked, his voice gravelly. "Yes," I replied, my frustration mounting. "And I saw a shadow, heard a voice. It said, 'Let me in.'" Mr. Alvarez sighed deeply, rubbing his temples. "You're not the first tenant to experience this," he admitted reluctantly. There have been stories, rumors, but nothing I can prove. What kind of stories? I pressed, leaning forward in my chair. He hesitated, then reached into a drawer and pulled out a thick, leather-bound ledger. This building has a history, he began. It was built in the 1920s, and over the years, there have been incidents. People seeing things, hearing things. Most dismiss it as urban legends. He opened the ledger and flipped through the pages, stopping at a particular entry. This apartment you're in, it used to belong to a woman named Isabel Vasquez. She was a recluse, kept to herself. One day, she simply vanished. No trace of her was ever found. I felt a chill run down my spine. And you think she's the one tapping on my window? Mr. Alvarez shrugged. Who can say? But her disappearance left a mark on this place. It's as if the building remembers. I left his office with more questions than answers, my mind reeling. Who was Isabel Vasquez? What had happened to her? And why was she reaching out to me? I spent the rest of the day researching, digging through old newspaper archives and online forums. The deeper I delved, the more unsettling the story became. Isabel Vasquez had been a woman of mystery. Neighbors described her as quiet, always polite but distant. She had no family, no friends, at least, none that anyone knew of. Her disappearance had been sudden and complete, as if she had vanished into thin air. The police had found no evidence of foul play, and the case had gone cold. As night fell, I prepared myself for another encounter. I armed myself with a flashlight and a camera, hoping to capture some evidence of the supernatural. The tapping began right on cue, as persistent as ever. This time, I was ready. I approached the window slowly, my heart pounding in my chest. Isabel, I whispered, feeling foolish. If you're there, show yourself. The tapping stopped, and for a moment, there was silence. Then, a figure materialized on the other side of the glass, a woman, pale and gaunt, with hollow eyes that seemed to bore into my soul. She raised a hand and placed it against the window, her mouth moving soundlessly. I snapped a photo, my hands shaking. The camera flashed, and for a split second, the room was bathed in light. When the darkness returned, the woman was gone. I examined the photo, my breath catching in my throat. There she was, clear as day, her face twisted in an expression of anguish. Help me, the voice echoed in my mind, a desperate plea that sent chills down my spine. Sleep eluded me that night. The image of Isabel's anguished face was seared into my mind. I knew I had to dig deeper to uncover the truth about her disappearance. I decided to explore my apartment more thoroughly, hoping to find something that might shed light on the mystery. The next day, I started my search. I combed through every corner, inspecting the walls, the floors, and even the ceiling for hidden compartments. Hours passed with no success. Just as I was about to give up, I noticed something odd about the floorboards in the closet. One of them was loose. My heart raced as I pried it up, revealing a small, dusty box hidden beneath. Inside the box was a diary, its pages yellowed with age. The cover was inscribed with the name Isabel Vasquez. My hands trembled as I opened it, feeling a strange connection to the woman who had once lived here. Her handwriting was neat and elegant, but the words told a story of isolation and fear. March 3, 1928, the tapping started again last night. It's been weeks since I first heard it. At first, I thought it was just the wind, but now I know better. Something is trying to reach me, something from beyond. I don't know what it wants, but I can feel its presence, watching me, waiting. March 12, 1928, I saw her today. A woman, standing outside my window. She looked just like me, but her eyes were hollow, empty. She whispered my name, begged me to let her in. I don't understand what's happening. Am I losing my mind? The entries grew more frantic, more desperate, as Isabel detailed her encounters with the apparition. She wrote about sleepless nights, the unrelenting cold, and the whispers that haunted her every moment. Her fear was palpable, a mirror of my own growing dread. April 5, 1928, I can't take it anymore. The tapping, the whispers. They're driving me mad. I've tried to leave, but every time I step out of the apartment, I feel an invisible force pulling me back. It's as if the building itself won't let me go. The final entry was the most chilling. April 15th, 1928, tonight, I'm going to end this. I have no other choice. If anyone finds this diary, please forgive me. I didn't want to leave this way, but I can't endure the torment any longer. I hope my spirit finds peace. The diary ended there. I closed it, my mind reeling. Isabel hadn't just disappeared, she had taken her own life, driven to the brink by the same terror that now plagued me. But if she was dead, who or what was the figure I had seen? That night, I placed the diary on the table and sat by the window, waiting. The tapping started, as persistent as ever. I opened the diary to the final page, hoping for some kind of connection, some understanding. The air grew cold, and the shadows in the room deepened. "Isabel," I called out, my voice steady. "I found your diary. I know what happened to you. Please, tell me what you want." The room was silent except for the sound of my own breathing. Then, slowly, the figure appeared again. Isabel, or whatever remained of her, stood on the other side of the glass, her expression mournful. She pressed her hand against the window, and I did the same, feeling an icy chill seep into my bones. "Help me," she mouthed again, her eyes pleading. "How?" I asked aloud. "How can I help you?" The figure began to fade, but not before pointing towards the diary. I looked down and saw that new words had appeared on the final page, written in Isabel's elegant script. "Find the key," it said. A sense of purpose surged within me. I had to find this key, whatever it unlocked, to free Isabel from her torment. But as I pondered this, a loud crash came from the hallway outside my apartment. The air grew colder still, and I knew I wasn't alone. I hesitated for a moment, my hand frozen on the doorknob. The crash echoed in my mind, amplifying my fear. Gathering my courage, I swung the door open and stepped into the dimly lit hallway. The air was icy, and an unnatural stillness pervaded the space. I scanned the corridor, my heart pounding, but saw nothing out of place. The silence was oppressive, pressing in from all sides. My mind raced as I tried to piece together the clues Isabel had left behind. The key, she had written. But a key to what? I returned to my apartment and retrieved the diary, flipping through the pages for any mention of a key. Near the beginning, I found a passage I had overlooked. March 7th, 1928, I've hidden the key in a place only I know. It's my only hope of keeping the darkness at bay. If anyone finds this, look where the shadows dwell. The shadows. I looked around my apartment, trying to decipher her cryptic message. The sun had set, casting long, eerie shadows across the room. I noticed a dark corner near the bookshelf, a place I rarely paid attention to. Moving the books aside, I discovered a small, hidden compartment in the wall. My fingers trembled as I pried it open, revealing an old, ornate key. Holding the key, I felt a strange sense of connection to Isabel, as if her spirit was guiding me. The key was heavy, its surface cool and smooth. I knew it had to open something significant, something that would reveal the final piece of the puzzle. As I pondered its purpose, the tapping resumed, louder and more insistent than ever. I turned towards the window, and there she was, Isabel, her face a mask of sorrow. She gestured towards the door with a sense of urgency. I understood then that the key was not meant for my apartment but for something beyond. I slipped the key into my pocket and followed the apparition into the hallway. The building seemed to shift around me, the walls closing in and the shadows deepening. I moved cautiously, the key clutched tightly in my hand. Isabel's ghostly form led me to the basement, a place I had never dared to venture. The air grew colder as we descended, the silence broken only by the sound of my footsteps echoing off the walls. In the basement, I found an old storage room, its door marked with strange, faded symbols. I inserted the key into the lock, and it turned smoothly. The door creaked open, revealing a dark, musty space filled with forgotten relics and broken furniture. At the center of the room stood a large, antique mirror, its surface covered in dust and grime. As I approached the mirror, a sense of dread washed over me. The glass was cracked, and I could barely make out my own reflection. Isabel appeared beside me, her eyes full of sorrow and hope. She pointed to the mirror, and I understood what I had to do. I wiped away the dust, revealing a hidden compartment at the back of the mirror frame. Inside the compartment was a small, ornate box. I opened it with trembling hands, revealing a set of old, yellowed letters tied with a black ribbon. The letters were addressed to Isabel from a man named Gabriel, detailing a forbidden love affair that had ended tragically. Gabriel had been accused of witchcraft and executed, leaving Isabel alone and heartbroken. The letters revealed that Isabel had tried to summon Gabriel's spirit, using dark rituals she barely understood. In her grief, she had opened a doorway to the other side, allowing something else to come through. Something malevolent. The entity had tormented her, leading to her ultimate despair and disappearance. Isabel's ghost looked at me, her eyes pleading for release. I knew what I had to do. I gathered the letters and set them alight with a candle I found in the room. The flames consumed the paper, and as the last of the letters turned to ash, I felt a rush of cold air and heard a faint whisper of gratitude. The mirror cracked further, and Isabel's image began to fade. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice a mere echo. "It's over now." Just as I felt a sense of relief wash over me, the basement door slammed shut with a force that shook the walls. The temperature plummeted, and the air grew thick with a presence that was not Isabel. The shadows around me twisted and writhed, forming into a dark, malevolent figure. "She may be free," it hissed, its voice a chilling rasp, "but you have opened the door for me." Before I could react, the entity lunged towards me, and the world plunged into darkness. Subscribe for more true scary stories. Story 2. The Inheritance. When my grandmother passed away, her house became my inheritance. The house stood on the outskirts of a small, fog-laden town, an ancient Victorian structure that seemed perpetually shrouded in gloom. I had always been intrigued by the house as a child, but never had the courage to explore its depths. Now, as its new owner, I found myself standing on the creaky porch, key in hand, ready to face whatever secrets it held. The interior was exactly as I remembered: dark wooden floors, faded wallpaper, and an eerie quiet that hung in the air like a specter. Among the furniture and knickknacks accumulated over decades, one piece stood out: a massive, ornate mirror in the hallway. It had always unnerved me. Unlike any other mirror, it never reflected my image as a child. I chalked it up to some trick of the light or my overactive imagination, but now, standing before it as an adult, I couldn't deny the unease it caused. On my first night in the house, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. I wandered the halls, every creak of the floorboards sending chills down my spine. The mirror loomed at the end of the hallway, its surface dark and foreboding. Despite my apprehension, I approached it, peering into its depths. As expected, it reflected everything: the hallway, the flickering candlelight, everything except me. Days passed, and the house's oppressive atmosphere began to take its toll. I started hearing whispers in the dead of night, unintelligible murmurs that seemed to come from within the walls. Objects moved on their own, doors creaked open without cause, and the mirror began to change. One evening, as I walked past it, I saw a shadow flicker within its depths, a fleeting glimpse of movement that sent my heart racing. Determined to understand the mirror's strange behavior, I began researching its origins. Old family records and dusty journals spoke of a curse, a dark history tied to the mirror's creation. It was said that the mirror trapped the souls of those who gazed into it for too long, holding them captive in a world of endless reflection. The more I read, the more convinced I became that something malevolent resided within its glass. Then, one night, it happened. I woke to the sound of scratching, like nails on a chalkboard, emanating from the hallway. Heart pounding, I grabbed a flashlight and crept towards the noise. As I approached the mirror, the scratching grew louder, more frantic. The beam of my flashlight illuminated the surface, and there, staring back at me, was an older version of myself. The figure was gaunt, with hollow eyes and a look of sheer terror etched on its face. It raised a trembling hand and mouthed a single, chilling word, "Run." I stumbled back, heart hammering in my chest. The reflection faded, leaving only the dark, empty hallway behind me. I knew then that the house held more than just memories of my grandmother. It held a darkness that threatened to consume me. The mirror had shown me my future, a warning I could not ignore. But what was I running from? And how could I escape a fate that seemed already written? Sleep became elusive after that night. Every creak and groan of the house seemed amplified, every shadow held potential terror. I avoided the mirror, but its presence was inescapable, a sinister weight pressing down on me. Determined to unravel the mystery, I dove deeper into my grandmother's journals, hoping to find answers in her meticulous handwriting. One entry caught my eye, dated shortly before her death. It spoke of nightmares and voices, of a figure in the mirror that wasn't her reflection. "The mirror shows what we fear most," she had written, "and once seen, it cannot be unseen." My blood ran cold as I realized she had faced the same horrors that now plagued me. Was this why she had never mentioned the mirror in her will? Had she hoped to spare me from its curse? Desperation drove me to seek help. I contacted an old family friend, Father O'Malley, a priest with a reputation for dealing with the supernatural. He arrived at the house, his stern demeanor softened by genuine concern. As we stood before the mirror, he whispered prayers and sprinkled holy water, his eyes never leaving its surface. "This mirror," he said gravely, "is a gateway. Something evil lies beyond." We decided to cover the mirror, hoping to diminish its influence. But even shrouded in heavy cloth, it seemed to pulse with dark energy. The whispers continued, growing louder each night. One evening, as I sat in the living room, I heard my grandmother's voice, soft and sorrowful. "James," she called, "help me." I rushed to the hallway, heart in my throat, only to find the mirror uncovered, the cloth discarded on the floor. Father O'Malley returned the next day with more holy artifacts. We performed a ritual, trying to cleanse the house. As we chanted, the air grew thick and the temperature plummeted. Shadows writhed on the walls, and the mirror began to glow with an eerie light. Suddenly, a force knocked us back, and the mirror cracked, a thin line spidering across its surface. "The crack is a weakness," Father O'Malley gasped, struggling to his feet. "We must destroy it." But the mirror had other plans. As we approached, the glass shimmered, and a dark, twisted version of myself emerged from its depths. It grinned malevolently, eyes gleaming with malice. "You cannot escape," it hissed. "This house is mine." Terror gripped me as I realized the truth. The mirror was not just a window to another world, it was a prison, holding something ancient and malevolent. And now, it wanted to claim me as its next victim. Father O'Malley grabbed a heavy candlestick and swung it at the mirror. The glass shattered, pieces flying in all directions. For a moment, there was silence. Then, the house erupted in chaos. The walls shook, and a deafening roar filled the air. Shadows surged from the broken mirror, swirling around us like a storm. Father O'Malley shouted for me to run, his voice barely audible over the cacophony. I stumbled towards the door, but the shadows closed in, cold and suffocating. Just as I felt myself being pulled into the darkness, a blinding light exploded around me, and everything went black. When I awoke, the house was silent. The mirror lay in shards on the floor, and Father O'Malley was gone. I was alone, the weight of what had happened pressing down on me. The mirror's curse was broken, but at what cost? And what had become of Father O'Malley? As I stood amidst the wreckage, a new fear took hold. The evil that had been trapped in the mirror was free, and it was only a matter of time before it found me again. The days following the destruction of the mirror were filled with an eerie calm, as if the house itself were holding its breath. Father O'Malley's disappearance weighed heavily on me. I searched every corner of the house, calling his name, but there was no sign of him. The town police were skeptical, attributing his absence to the stress and shock of the ritual. They promised to investigate, but their lack of urgency was palpable. I couldn't leave the house, not yet. Something compelled me to stay, a sense that the story wasn't over. I continued my research, combing through my grandmother's belongings for any clue that might explain what had happened. Late one night, I discovered a hidden compartment in her writing desk, revealing a collection of old letters and photographs. Among them was a letter addressed to me, written in my grandmother's familiar, looping script. "Dearest James," it began, "if you are reading this, then my fears have come to pass. The mirror is more than a family heirloom, it is a sentinel, a barrier between our world and something far darker. It was given to our family by an ancestor who dabbled in forbidden arts. The mirror holds a spirit, an ancient evil that feeds on fear and despair. I tried to protect you by never speaking of it, but I see now that silence was a mistake." The letter went on to describe a ritual, a way to banish the spirit permanently. It required a personal sacrifice, something of great value to the person performing it. My grandmother had attempted it but failed, her own fears too strong to overcome. "You are stronger than I ever was," she wrote. "You have the courage to face what I could not. Do not let this darkness consume you, as it did me." Armed with this knowledge, I prepared for the final confrontation. The ritual called for a series of symbols to be drawn in a circle, with the shattered pieces of the mirror placed at the center. I needed something of great personal value, a token of my own vulnerability. I chose a locket my grandmother had given me, containing a photo of us together. It represented not just my love for her, but my deepest fear, losing her all over again. As night fell, I began the ritual. The symbols glowed faintly in the dim light, the air thick with anticipation. I placed the locket in the center of the circle, along with the mirror shards. The house seemed to hold its breath, the silence oppressive. I began to chant the incantation from my grandmother's letter, my voice trembling. The air grew colder, and shadows gathered at the edges of the room, watching. Suddenly, a gust of wind swept through the house, extinguishing my candles. The shadows surged forward, coalescing into a familiar form, the twisted version of myself that had emerged from the mirror. It smiled, a cold, mocking expression. "You think you can banish me?" it sneered. "You are nothing but a scared child, hiding behind your grandmother's skirts." "I'm not afraid of you," I shouted, though my voice wavered. I continued the chant, forcing the words out through sheer willpower. The shadow self laughed, a sound like broken glass. It lunged at me, but was repelled by the circle of symbols, writhing in frustration. "You cannot win," it hissed. "This house will be your tomb." The room darkened further, the shadows pressing in. I felt a crushing weight on my chest, my strength ebbing away. The locket glowed faintly, a beacon in the darkness. With the last of my energy, I reached out and clasped it in my hand, focusing on the memory of my grandmother. Her voice echoed in my mind, a soothing balm against the fear. "Be brave, James. You can do this." Summoning every ounce of courage, I shouted the final words of the incantation. The symbols flared with blinding light, the shadows shrieking in agony. The dark figure dissolved, its screams echoing through the house. The light intensified, filling the room, and I felt the oppressive weight lift. The shadows receded, leaving only silence and the faint glow of the locket. Exhausted, I collapsed to the floor, clutching the locket. The ritual had worked, the evil was banished, the house once again quiet. But the victory felt hollow. Father O'Malley was still missing, and I had no idea where he had gone or if he was even alive. As I lay there, catching my breath, a new thought struck me. What if the spirit wasn't truly gone? What if it was merely biding its time, waiting for another opportunity to strike? The days that followed the ritual were filled with an uneasy peace. The house seemed to have returned to its dormant state, no longer alive with the malevolent energy that had haunted me. Yet, the uncertainty of Father O'Malley's fate gnawed at me. I couldn't leave until I knew what had happened to him, or if he was even still within the house. One evening, as I rummaged through the attic, hoping to find some overlooked clue, I came across an old photograph. It was of my grandmother and a group of people dressed in antiquated clothing, standing in front of the house. Among them was a man who bore an uncanny resemblance to Father O'Malley. My heart skipped a beat. Was it possible he had been connected to this place long before my time? The idea was unsettling but made a strange kind of sense. Determined to uncover the truth, I decided to explore the cellar, the one part of the house I had avoided. The cellar door creaked ominously as I opened it, revealing a steep staircase descending into darkness. With a flashlight in hand, I descended, the air growing colder with each step. The cellar was damp and musty, filled with old furniture and forgotten relics. In the far corner, I found a hidden door, its edges barely visible in the dim light. It led to a small, secret room, and within, I discovered a shrine of sorts. Candles, long extinguished, surrounded a small altar. On it lay a book, ancient and bound in leather. As I opened it, the pages crackled with age. The text was written in Latin, but I recognized some of the symbols from the ritual I had performed. This was the source of the curse, the original spell that had trapped the spirit within the mirror. As I read, I heard a faint noise behind me, a whisper, like the rustling of leaves. I turned, my flashlight beam revealing Father O'Malley, standing at the entrance. His face was pale, eyes hollow, but he was alive. "Father!" I cried, rushing to his side. He looked at me, his expression one of exhaustion and relief. "James," he murmured, "you found it." Together, we pieced together the truth. The man in the photograph, the one who looked like Father O'Malley, was his ancestor. He had been the one to first trap the spirit, using the mirror as a prison. The curse had bound his bloodline to the house, compelling each generation to guard the secret. Father O'Malley had been drawn here, unknowingly fulfilling his ancestors' duty. "There's one final step," he said, his voice weak. "We must destroy the source of the curse." He pointed to the book. "This spell must be undone." We prepared for the final ritual, setting up in the secret room. The symbols were drawn once again, the pieces of the shattered mirror placed at the center. This time, we both held items of personal significance, his crucifix and my locket. As we began the incantation, the air grew thick with tension, the shadows in the room deepening. The moment we uttered the final words, the room exploded with light. The book ignited, flames consuming the ancient pages. The shadows screamed, writhing as they were pulled towards the burning book. The mirror shards glowed, vibrating with energy. Then, with a final, ear-splitting crack, they disintegrated into dust. The light faded, leaving us in silence. The oppressive weight that had hung over the house lifted, replaced by a profound sense of peace. Father O'Malley and I emerged from the cellar, exhausted but triumphant. The curse was broken, the spirit banished forever. The house, once a place of fear, felt strangely welcoming. In the days that followed, I prepared to leave, finally ready to say goodbye to my grandmother's house. Father O'Malley returned to his parish, his duty fulfilled. As I packed my belongings, I found the locket, still warm from the ritual. I opened it, staring at the photo of my grandmother and me. For the first time in weeks, I felt a sense of closure. On my last night, I stood on the porch, gazing at the house. It no longer felt like a prison, but a testament to the strength and courage of those who had fought to protect their loved ones. As I turned to leave, I glanced back one final time, and for a fleeting moment, I thought I saw my grandmother standing in the doorway, smiling. The mirror might be gone, but her spirit would always be with me, a guardian in the shadows. The end. Subscribe for more. Thanks for watching.